Hello, everyone. Welcome to Empathy by Design by Integrate Trauma Informed Network. This is I call it the micro podcast because this is the podcast where you can get to know us a little bit better, get to know our conversations, get to know the people that we do community with, including our affinity group. So, Empathy by Design is a podcast that's helping us redefine behavioral and mental health by exploring the intersection of empathy, trauma informed care, and innovation. So through the conversations, we talk to industry leaders in mental health, in tech, in inclusion work, in UX, as we provide actionable strategies and fresh ideas to balance these data-driven solutions with compassionate client-centered care, which is what we're all about. So this is a great show for clinicians, tech professionals, UX designers, anyone really in tech, in the human care world, where we're really looking at how we use tech to drive ethics, innovation, and just increased quality of human care. So welcome to everyone. Today we have Tristan Kelan on, who is the founder of Folio and the director of growth and development at Informed. So welcome, Tristan. I'm really excited to talk about these topics with you. Tell us more about your work a little bit and before we dive into our questions.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Really happy to be here. I love talking about that intersection between just what you have, right? Trauma-informed care, empathy, but then also data technology, because it's really got a bear hug around all of us these days.
Mm-hmm.
So just a short little piece, my background. I started in behavioral health, EHRs. Spent some time as a quality improvement director for children's behavioral health services where I live in Western New York, and then also as a data analyst with a sliver of learn as you go engineering. So that's sort of where I meet these two worlds colliding, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So such important work for sure, especially how you started out with children's behavioral health. Wow, that's really important. So let's talk a little bit about behavioral health. So how can healthcare organizations like Integrate Trauma Informed Care or other places that you've worked, how can we use those principles of trauma informed care, which if you're not familiar with those, I will put them in the show notes. Go look at Katie Kurtz's website because I know she has SAMHSAs all over there. I'm not sure if SAMHSA, I don't know if they exist anymore on the CDC website given our current climate. So I know Katie has them over on her website. So go to katiekurtz.com and you could go find the principles of trauma informed care. But how can we take those principles, okay, safety, trustworthiness, mutual peer support, and help those drive quality improvement processes without compromising the trust and safety of clinical staff and clients?
Yeah. So, not only do you not want to compromise on safety and trust, it's actually imperative that you lean into that, or else you're not going to get where you're trying to go. So I come at this from the lens of, community mental health center, and think about the quality assurance, quality improvement teams that are kind of like, that agency, like central consultancy that sort of works with all programs, works with all departments, and just sort of looks for, lagging key performance indicators, and you try to, find places to run plan, do, study, act type projects where, you want to bring those indicators back up, right? So, I really start the quality improvement conversation with saying, like, yeah, there's techniques and there's granularity, but not at first. It's just the scientific method, right? It's fourth grade science. Hypothesize something, try it. If it works, do more of it. If it doesn't, stop, right? Or try again. The only thing that's important to couch around that, and I think this like starts entering the conversation, is that testing when your clients are human can't be like arbitrary or frivolous, right? Like, let's do a double blind study where on homelessness, where we intentionally have a group of people be homeless so we can test them against the other homeless. Like, no, if you have a place you can home them, like do it, because the ethical responsibility behind that. outweighs any, data testing that you might get, which is what makes, studies in our field very difficult because, true experimental design is largely unethical if you really think about it.
Yeah, let's have you stage homelessness so we get good data. There's lots of issues with
Right.
that.
I love good data, right? But no, we're
Right.
not gonna do that, right?
Right.
But so what I believe I have a couple of principles that are sort of tried and true from quality improvement that you can map over here. And the sort of godfather, if you will, W. Edwards Deming, who sort of invented the structure of quality improvement really around factory waste, right? Like how to leave less on the cutting room floor, when you cut out all your widgets, right? But his principles are like probably almost more identifiable to me with human services than they are to manufacturing work. And the first one is he always said, look to the process owners. So if you're a
Mhm.
quality improvement person and you come into a program and you say, "Hey, our no-show rate is bad, so now you're going to do this." Promise you that won't work, right? If you come in and say, "Our no-show rate is lagging," let's round up a group of frontline clinicians and ask them why they show them it's lagging, ask them why they think it is, and let them tell us. I think if we behaved this way instead, that would improve. Okay. Because if your people who have to execute don't I help you ideate the solution, they're not going to be invested in it, and it's probably not going to be right. Right. And even if you've done clinical process in the past and you transition into quality improvement, like the landscape changes, everything changes. If you're not living and breathing it, like you're the wrong person to come up with the solution. You're the right person to objectively use data and identify topics of conversation, right? But you are not the person who should come in and mandate, now we're going to manage our calendars this way, because they can probably give you 7 reasons why that won't work. Or even if you're right, they're not invested, right? So it's some people say it's like a trick, like, oh, if I just get them to think it's their idea. Well, what if you did that, but it wasn't a trick? Like, let's have it be their idea. And so, quality improvement in agency settings really relies on the process owners to drive meaningful change. So,
Absolutely.
so how do you get process owners to engage with you? Well, I can tell you some ways not to. Make them feel threatened, make them feel scared, make them feel angry. How about those as bad ways of getting somebody to jump on board with what you're trying to do? So invert that, and a couple of reasons. One, I think this works on its own right, but two, your language matching, if you actually talk openly about doing quality improvement from a trauma informed lens. Like I would tell clinicians, like it's not a hack that I use trauma informed thinking in quality improvement, right? It's because
Mhm.
I need you to feel safe. I need you to trust me. I need you to be willing to collaborate with me. I need you to feel empowered to make change. And by the way, everybody deserves choice. Like, how's those? There's 5-year core principles right there, and I go to the window of tolerance, right?
Yeah. It's
And
our favorite.
yeah, so like I said, I almost feel like I'm stealing because I haven't invented any of this.
Right.
I've just taken it and applied it in an area where there's probably people out there doing a lot of this. They just don't have language to it,
Yeah.
or they're thinking about why they can't move the needle forward, and maybe here's some obstacles why they can help, break that down. But let's talk about the window for a second. You're a clinician, and I bring you into a project because I need you to be a creative problem solver, right? I'm going to throw a problem
Mhm.
at you. I need you to help me solve it. If I push you into fight, flight, or freeze, then I have taken you out of all the characteristics that I want you to be like owning to be your creative problem solving best. And the average, I don't want to like there's there's always an average, right? There's always people for whom this isn't an issue, and there's always people for whom it's a serious issue. So I'm just going to
Hmm.
generalize. The average frontline clinical staff person has been forced to use bad technology at some point,
Hmm.
technology that didn't work.
Hmm.
They've been shown data that was reflective of them and wrong,
Yeah.
right? They've been given a number, but also told this is the way. They've been mandated, value-based care. It's all going to be data-driven. Like they've been inundated to a level with data and technology that never helped them, right?
Right.
It wasn't for them, it was at them.
Yeah.
And so when you come in and say, no-show rates down, let's talk about improving it, that person can go, you think my no-show rate's down? You're going to fire me, aren't you? You're trying to tell me that I'm not performing correctly, right? And boom, outside the window, right?
Right. Exactly.
So it's important to create a culture, and you can't build culture overnight. So all of this has to be like, you have to embrace it, go with it, and let it stack up over time. That person needs to see you come in and know that quality improvement's not about individual punitive punishment, right? It's about group success, and it's about
Hmm.
studying individuals to find out what works well so that you can sort of replicate that to other individuals, right? So you want that person to feel safe and trust you in a way where they can say, all right, no show rates down, which means my reaction is let's dig in and fix it, not let
Hmm.
me push this person away and let all this friction that's going to, quite frankly, get us nowhere.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, even my own experience, I was reflecting there from my own experiences. Absolutely. I think that there is a lot that needs to be discussed about how we bring in the people, as you said, that are executing some of the services. How do you bring them into the solution for quality assurance? Like 200%. And because I mean, I know my felt experience is this. I was even in a position recently or this week where something like that was happening, and the person that's overseeing this project actually that was my fear. And then he brought me in the way that you did, and he was like, hey, there's a user issue, da 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 da, like let's find a strategy to help us do that. And I was like, my whole body changed. Now I think in that position, in the email he was like, let's why don't you come into my office and let's talk. And I was like, oh,
Oh, yeah. The
you
old
know
let's talk.
I was
Quick chat. Time for a quick chat.
right,
Yeah.
right, time for a quick chat. And then once he was there, it totally became trauma informed and like human centered. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
this could have saved me a little bit of cortisol if like, cortisol
Yeah.
drips if you would have like restaged this in the email. But but anyway, but so the point in saying that is like I think that there is really something to thinking through that, because I think in our nature as someone that has managed, someone that sits on both of those, I manage and I design, and I am like, if from especially from a manager perspective, because you're like, I want to get them in line, boundaries. There's something to that from a manager perspective that really has to be held with some curiosity and some, well, how can I put how do I need to position myself so I can make sure someone is in within their, a space of critical thinking and problem solving, and so they don't do what I did, which was go into, this project manager's office with a little bit of outside, but then I came in later.
Mhm. Yep.
I was like, so I
Yeah.
think there is like some objectivity that we need to move into when we are in a position like that, for sure.
Yeah. And one of the, tactically, if you're sitting in, one of these quality leadership positions and you're like, okay, well, that sounds great. Like, how do I do that? Right? How do I make, come on in and let's talk, something that doesn't sort of, spike you emotionally, right? Like, how do you achieve that? And I think probably, and this is where, I say culture change takes time, and this is no different, but you need to find a way to have this conversation be part of new hire orientation in
Yeah.
not in a cheap way. So my agency used to do new hire orientations like every other week, large enough that we're sort of always
Hmm.
hiring, kind of a thing. And I made the commitment to go. Now my piece wasn't long. I had like 15 minutes on like a 2.5 day orientation, but I
Hmm.
always did it live. Like I chose not to have it be a handout, plus a 5 minute video recording that you watch and, sort of snooze on, with the lights off in a training room, right? I made the commitment to show up. And the purpose of that, and it takes a little while for you to see the payback, but when I did go into programs down the line and start to put teams together and sort of execute on that work, that person who you haven't seen for a year, but they remember you. And they
Yeah.
remember that you came, and they remember if you were fun and you smiled and you cracked a joke and stayed for the box lunch that came, and just sort of like that rapport sounds common sense from like just a peer-to-peer standpoint, but it's so critical when you come in with heavy, like it's heavy topics, right? When you come
Right.
in with like, I'm the mad scientist with all my data and I just came out of the lab with all the stuff that I'm going to throw at you, like it lands heavy. And I don't, and again, not to generalize everybody, but the clinical day is a narrative day. It's spent with reading, writing, and conversation. The data analyst day is the opposite. It's
Right.
it's put on your best music and not talk while you get into engineering, and please don't break my concentration because then I have to start over, kind of a thing, right? And so when you come in hot and heavy with, all right, I've been working on this report for 3 months and here it is, but you like data vomit, like
Hmm.
this is why, and we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. You've come in with a seriously different thing than your audience lives and breathes most days. Now, I'm not saying change that. I'm not saying that's avoidable. I'm saying know what you're in on, right?
Right.
So that you can like coach into that, and almost like if you can embrace the idea that when you bring data, you also have to be the therapist, like with the
Yeah.
data. Like if somebody, hey, does this make sense to everybody? When somebody says, uh-huh, and they mean it, or uh-huh, and they don't mean it, right?
Right.
Like tell a
Yeah.
room, you all just agreed that you understand it. I don't believe you. So ask a question. Let's stop. I'm not going to let us just move on, because then down the road, we're going to be operating with assumptions that everybody understood the thing 5 minutes ago. And if that's not true, we're just going to fall off the tracks later, right? So,
Yes.
like, be in it in a way where and that'll build trust, right? I'm going to pull you along with me. I'm going to carry you
Hmm.
over this knowledge gap to get to where you're going to be able to say, I know what we should do here, instead of, I still don't know what we're doing here.
Yeah. And I think, um, and this is moving into number two a little bit, but I'm thinking of like from like data driven stuff. I'm wondering what your take is on this because I know in the world of wellness, which is what we do, because we do wellness tech, we have mindfulness, we
Mhm.
have yoga, we do all that stuff. We have yoga teachers in our affinity group. Um, we have to deal with the the student comment section. Gosh darn it. Okay.
Yep.
Not
Yep.
reliable data at all, but it's what a lot of small businesses, even
Hmm.
like Google ads, not Google ads, Google reviews.
Hmm.
Okay. Everybody lives and breathes and dies on Google reviews, for maybe not mental health, but it's still data, right? And
Sure.
it's what data a lot of people in the not necessarily mental health, but more in the wellness space look at. And so like, and those are the most I always call them I those comments I think are one of the most they're someone's obviously non-objective. They're someone's opinion that
Sure.
many people take as data. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? Like
Hmm.
small business
Yeah,
owners will be like,
for
someone
sure.
said a bad, Yelp review, you know what I mean? Or a
Yep.
bad whatever review. And then it's like all of a sudden that's the only truth, right?
Yep.
This is what I have to work through a lot with it integrate and like how do we objectively hold that,
Mhm.
you know, or like an Amazon review on a book, you know?
Yep.
So I'm going back to like empathy decision because it's still data. So
Mhm.
how do you hold those in your head? Like those, like the comments, you know, like client comments or
Sure.
something like that. You know, these the point is whether it's Yelp or an Amazon review of a book on mental health or whatever, how do you hold like a comment from a client about their experience with a clinician?
Sure. Um, so I'm going to talk about structured data for a
Yeah.
second, just
Hmm.
because that's where my experience lies, and then
Yeah.
I can kind of frame it over. But
Yeah.
I had a rule for myself that, again, I didn't know I had this rule until I did it a bunch of times, and I went, "Oh, you know what? I actually have a rule for when this happens."
Right.
And if anybody in my programs challenged my data, right? Um, the rule was to not push back.
Yeah.
So I am obsessed. If you've achieved either achieved or are still trying to achieve a trust level that makes the people you're working with feel safe. That's like,
Right.
if I had to boil it down,
Right.
make them trust you so that they feel safe so that we can all get the work done, right? That
Right.
would
Right.
be like the key. And if they said that number doesn't look right to me, I would never, ever, ever let that not hold,
Right.
right? Even if I know that it is, I would always allow that challenge and say, can you tell me why you think it's not right? What's your gut telling you that it's not right? And I promise that we will table it today so that I can investigate it, and we'll come back to you
Hmm.
with my investigation, whether I still think it's right, whether you're like, I, every single data challenge was allowed to have its day in court,
Right.
right? And I think that's the lens with which I think about the comment stuff that you just brought up, right? Because like your truth is your truth,
Yeah.
right? Your feelings are
Yeah.
your feelings. And so I almost think about it from like a relationship standpoint, like
Hmm.
when you're like, I didn't mean it that way. Well, but I felt it that way. So that's great that it wasn't your intent to upset me, but I
Right.
am now upset.
Right.
And
Right.
that's still true. So, some, best practices would say, like, don't let a bad review hang out
Right.
unanswered, right? And I agree with that. But also, can you acknowledge in that like, don't just like respond to it because you can combat it or you can fix it. Like,
Right.
I think you have to own things even when they're not yours,
Right. Yeah.
for the sake of preserving trust and safety,
Yeah.
or that person's going to continue to feel that way about you in that review, and maybe worse, rather than leaving a door open for like, that might have been your experience today, and we would love you to take a shot at a better experience in the future, because it's not always like that, right?
Right.
Or
Exactly. Exactly. No, no, no. That makes total sense. Yeah. And I think that's kind of how I view it as well. I think they are relational. I think that I absolutely see them as relational. And I think that those are all valid statements. So I think that holding those as a relational are always really
yeah.
critical because it's like, yeah, your feelings are your feelings, you know, and I always say two things can be true at the same time. That's what I
I say,
always
I say that all the time. Two things could be true. But another common scenario for that, I think, is in tech customer service,
yeah.
right? And I service a software application, and sometimes user can't access this page or whatever, right? And sometimes it's the software, or sometimes it's something that's going on the user's end on the
Right.
computer, right? And diagnosing which side the problem is on is important, but it's equally as important that you don't like bail when you find out it's not on you, right?
Right.
Like, oh, you can't access that page. I have isolated it to you need to run an update on your machine, right? So
Right.
not my problem anymore.
Yeah.
Or you can see it through to the end and come back around and say, hey, did you ever get that updated? Because even though it was your to-do item, not me, I'm still invested in you having access to my software. So I want to know that I'm still want to make sure that you resolved your issue, even if it wasn't my to-do to resolve.
Yeah.
Like wouldn't you want your vendors to be invested in, or, the primary thing that you can use their app? They care way less whose fault it is or what the reason is. Like, you're
Right.
trying to give them something they can use, you should make sure they could use it. Everything else is just diagnosis.
Exactly. And I think it's interesting because I was literally just in an email last night about getting people onto Teachable for our symposium. And I've had which is this is like the email I get all the time. Especially when we're launching a new program is when I get people because I we don't always ticket through Teachable. I always have to get them into the CMS. And I mean, I always people lose the email. They lose the email where they onboard. I mean, all the time. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just, all the time. And I think I always think about when we're doing onboarding to a new, whether it's the app or Teachable, where our courses and our leadership stuff is, people always be like, I get the email like I can't get online. I can't find the email. I can't, I'm getting your emails, but I can't access the content. And I always think about that because we're working from a trauma informed lens, and I'm always like, how far down do I should I go with that? And I go to the
Mhm.
point of here's my Zoom because I've definitely had people. If we need to get on and I need to share my screen and walk you through this step by step, I do have users that do that, that need that because I don't have a lot of people that access this stuff are not the most tech friendly. They just want the accessibility, meaning the ease of approach. It's approachable. It's right there at their fingertips. They want the usability feature because it's right there. But they don't always, the tech knowledge is not super high, right? So I go as far as being like, here's my Zoom or my meeting. If you need to go this far with me, here's where we'll go. So and there's 5 or 6 times where I've definitely had to get on a Zoom for about 20 minutes to do a, customer service, play by
Mhm.
play.
Yeah. Yep. And do you want to scale that? Of course.
Yeah.
Do you want to serve it first with, here's a guide or
Yeah.
here's a thing?
Yeah.
Like, sure, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just sort of working backwards. But yeah, I'm a big fan of support your users first, your
Yeah.
platform second.
Exactly.
If you only support your platform, you're going to end up with
No
unhappy
users.
unhappy users, and trust me, at the point that a user is unhappy with your software, the where the fault lies doesn't matter.
Right.
It's on you.
Exactly. That's what Norman says in is it something by design? I always forget the name of his book. But in my audible in my thing just died. But like anyway, it's the design of everyday things by Norman,
Mhm.
whatever his first name is. But that's what he always is like, well, it goes back it's like you're the parents of it. It's on you. And
Mhm.
so
Yeah, right.
it's like you're the product parent. So therefore it comes back to your decision making. So
Mhm.
absolutely. So moving on to let me go back to my notes. So moving on to number three, because we kind of went through number two, um, and on how you make, decision on how we hold those decisions. I think that was great. But so in terms of data analytics, how can we use technology and data to be designed to align with the core values of trauma informed care, ensuring that, that they enhance rather than hinder, the user experience and a clinician who's also a user in some, platforms.
Yeah. So like I said, for my background and my lens is like the community clinic. So I'm always, my end users are the clinicians, not
Hmm.
like not their clients, right?
Right,
I'm in the like serve the clinician because if you take care of them, they can take care of their clients.
right.
That's the win line for the work that I do. Design, there are people, if you don't know Rachel Deacus, like
Yeah, yeah,
she's
yeah. I know
she's
Rachel.
she's amazing. There is like stylistic product design with trauma informed thinking that I'm a huge fan of. I'd be over my skis if I tried to say the hows and whys.
Hmm.
But let's just say check her out, and I'm
Yeah.
supportive of that. Now, what I will say along some of that user experience is, you know, form over function, I think,
Right.
prevails most of the time.
Hmm.
Um, I never met an EHR client that, you know, that complained that their buttons weren't rounded or their menus weren't sleek
Hmm.
and, collapsing. What they complain about is my system went down. I can't access charts. My progress note won't save. Like when the products work, that is a huge layer of, not to be a broken record, but like if they trust the system, then they can come into the system from a place of safety and get to work. The documentation around, community mental health is arduous enough, right?
Yeah.
The documentation mandates are substantial, and I'm not the one, and I'm not here to debate the regulatory rights and wrongs of all of that. But what I know is if you block out today at 10 a.m. to get a piece of work done, and at 10 a.m. you can't get that piece of work done, that might be a roadblock to getting other work done.
Hmm.
And what you do is to you it's a software problem, to the user it is 3 hours added to their Saturday, which
Hmm.
becomes burnout, which becomes I don't want to be in this business anymore, right? And we've
Right.
seen the clinician turnover rate, not just from leaving a job but leaving the entire field, is substantial. And if you look at it from like a sports perspective, technology is an anti-in, it's a requirement. Technology that doesn't work is an accelerator contributing to burnout. And I
Right.
think you have to be willing to accept that responsibility. What, are you
Hmm.
going to be perfect? No, but that's not what it's about. It's
Right.
about the intent behind, when you set your expectations for service, your expectations for uptime, your expectations for speed, if your screens load slow. Those sound like nerdy technology things, but to
Hmm.
a mental health clinician, they're the things that make you not the enemy that is causing late night, after hours, and overtime work to people because they weren't able to do the thing in the moment that they really needed to do it. Right. So,
Right.
I say whether it's data or software or whatever, um, and you could probably apply this to many industries, but I don't work in many industries. I work in this one. Um,
Yeah.
you have like a moral responsibility to try really, really hard not to be the one that is unoptimizing a therapist because, man, they got enough other unoptimized things that they can't control. Like, don't be another one of them. And when you are, acknowledge it. Like, systems down, you'll have to, well, it'll be back up tomorrow morning. Like, yeah, like if that's what it is, do it, but don't celebrate that. You've ruined a lot of days that day,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
Or like it's easy to say for you to pick and choose priority issues.
Hmm.
Um, oh, your chart won't print. Well, we're an electronic health record, so that's on the back burner. We'll worry about that later. Well, to the clinician who just got court mandated to print out a chart and bring it down, like you had a chart subpoenaed and it needs to go to the judge, you have to print that out and take that down to the courthouse. Tell that clinician that's not a high priority when they're there at, 7:30 at night fighting with a print function. So, again, trauma informed says you can't assume what is okay and what is not on to somebody else,
Yeah.
right? Somebody's tells you that the print function is working. They might not be telling you that they got subpoenaed to bring a chart to a judge, and that's like what's going on with them that day. So we need to remember in customer service that they tell you what's not working. What they're not telling you, there's a story, and you just have to assume that it might be a substantial story or a
Right.
traumatic story that they're in the middle of.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And uh, and it says a lot about the amount of inquiry, which is a big part that you have to do sometimes in that weaving that narrative together, in
Sure.
in quality assurance.
Or like openness, right? You know, ask somebody.
Yeah.
Don't assume low priorities, right? Like, what's so wrong
Hmm.
with a customer service representative saying, hey, I received your ticket that your print function is not working. Can you tell me the scenario that you're in? Not your click path, not the error message, although I'm gonna need
Hmm.
those things too. But like, are it's almost like, are you okay? Like, if the print function
Hmm.
is not working right now, what is that causing for you? Because
Right.
maybe that context is worth knowing. Oh, you were just trying to print out a chart? Okay, great. That gives us all a level set. Oh, you're in like an emergency, like this is standing between you and a court order. Well, then
Right.
maybe I'll go nudge a senior guy and we'll try to get on this sooner. Like ask, you know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And knowing that you're not alone in that, and you can find people to help. God, that is one
Yeah,
big thing in a quality assurance sometimes is finding
for
your
sure.
helpers.
Yeah, right.
is,
So
is
there's
making sure
one
that you're go
there
ahead. Go
there's
ahead.
that's like the software
Right.
piece of that for me. The data piece of that is there's so much reporting, right? There like
Right.
the state this state regulatory agency gets a monthly set of numbers. The other state agency gets the same numbers, but they have different calculation requirements, or like the
Right.
numerators and denominators are different. Or, you have foundation grant and they want this set of numbers. And,
Hmm.
there's the administrative burden doesn't just stop with clinical documentation. It rolls up to agency, typically quality, but data teams, whether they're embedded in quality teams or not. And
Hmm.
you have to do all this stuff. So I really believe that the best thing people in my line of work can do is data automation. And it's not data automation because it's efficient in its own right, which is true,
Hmm.
but you have to try to change the push to a or change the pull to a push. So if you're sitting in a pull scenario, you're a team that says, send me your numbers. Like, it's the end of the month. Program one, I need your numbers. Program two, I need
Hmm.
your numbers. And you're acting as the data consolidator by having people run their own reports and their own systems and send you stuff in, right?
Right.
That is something that you can and should take off their plate.
Right.
You should be working to go into their systems, pull their data out, do the calculations. You should be the one saying, program one, here's your monthly numbers. Program two, here's your monthly numbers, right? And that change of direction is critical, because a program person who spends the amount of time that it takes to do their own reporting is fried at the end.
Right.
They
Yeah.
are fried. If the
Yes.
next question is intended to be, now that we have our data for the month, let's talk about how we can improve. Window of tolerance, toast. You are
Oh,
you are out.
absolutely.
You are out.
Yeah.
It,
You are out. Out.
if you can change that direction from pull to push, then you I'm going to say it again, you earn the trust
Yeah.
and you have the collaboration and you're empowering and you're doing all of those things to be able to say, here's your numbers. And since you haven't spent any time or energy yet on them, we get to skip ahead to the part and apply the energy that you used to slave over pivot tables
Right.
to the data's already ready.
Right.
Now I want you to read it with me and react to it with me and talk to me about it, and we'll have the quality improvement conversations. You earn that right to force those conversations to happen. The
Yeah.
moment that you take a monster task off of their plate. So I think that that data automation, changing the direction of data
Yeah.
from in and out of program is the first most important linchpin. If you're somebody who does quality improvement and you're asking programs to send you numbers, I would shut down everything, talk to
Yeah.
finance about budget, whatever you need, so that you can like priority number one, flip that switch, and then all those conversations about getting better are going to be enabled because you get to shift resource being time and brain power.
Absolutely. I think that that's a really beautiful workflow. I like that workflow a lot. That's awesome. It doesn't always happen, and I think about that even from a trainer perspective of like, you know, like when, I mean, this gets better, but like having people fill out their initial feedback of your training, like in the comment section. Like one time I saw someone put the facilitation in the comments like right after, and I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, that's a beautiful workflow. That's
Mhm.
if you can make it happen. Sometimes people get off Zoom so quickly that you can't get it, but like
Right,
like,
right.
but I really like that workflow where like, and sometimes I've been in some situations where I've been training and they're like, you're gonna stay, no one's
Mhm.
getting off until you
Mhm.
fill that form out,
Right.
okay? And they have their data person like making sure everyone is filling out the form,
Mhm.
So I think
And
it's a great one.
if you allow time in the time you ask for, right? If you ask for an hour of
Right.
somebody's time and the last 5 minutes are the survey, great.
Oh,
If you ask for an hour of somebody's time and minutes 60 through 65 are supposed to be the
uh-huh.
survey, you're out of school. You're over,
Uh,
you know what I mean? You're not honoring
their time.
your part of the deal.
Yeah.
So I think that yeah, that works really well. Plus, if you go to a conference, nothing's ever performed better than the old paper survey that's sitting on your chair when you show up, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Those are always so interesting to me as a trainer because I always, because on the receiving end of that, I'm like, I'm not, because I do those. We put them in there and then I'm like, I'm going to wait a week to read them. Um,
But the
because
response
people,
rate, response rates are good.
the response rates are really good. And then I'm always like, I'm gonna wait for my nervous system to settle before I read them so I can like take them in objectively. Because sometimes people, even if they're in good training, especially trauma informed training, they will get very this is going back to our comments section, like our Yelp reviews, you
Hmm.
know, which are kind of like my, as a trainer and as an instructional designer, it's kind of like our version of a Yelp review.
Hmm.
Is a training feedback form. And I always am interested because sometimes if people, because we get into like, our stuff when we're activated, how, and people will get activated when you start talking about activation. And then you ask for a survey feedback form and you will see their trauma response in your survey. And
Hmm.
then, and then they'll,
Yeah.
but, and so that's why I'm always like, I'm going to wait till later to read those because lots of times people will get into things and people will have an emotional response. And it's not that it's always objective to the way I was doing it. It's just that the topic was
Mhm.
activating,
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I always wait for like a week because I have to hold it very objectively, and be like, is it me or was it because we were talking about childhood trauma, you
Yeah.
know?
Right, right.
So it's like, so reading that data is always really interesting, because it's not like, did you have a good, how did you because it's personal, and
Yeah.
people have personal responses to this work. So that's why I was laughing. I was like, yeah, it's always, I wait a week until my nervous system can like get into critical thinking and, could get into that. And sometimes after I'm done training, I'm like, I can't look at those for a week. Let me
Yep.
give myself some space.
No, I mean it's absolutely um your training is the effort that creates the data. And
Right.
so immediately after that is not the moment where you could think critically about it. No, that tracks perfectly to my experience. So
Yeah, totally. So, in terms of effectiveness, like to what degree, I mean, you've talked about a little bit, so we'll probably be repeating something in our last point here. And I know Rachel Dekas is also someone who also, Katie Kurtz and I talk about this all the time, and Rachel comes up in conversation, is how do you track effectiveness for trauma-informed care, trauma-informed principles in quality assurance?
so like at the treatment level.
Yeah, at the treatment level.
Yeah. Um, so full disclosure, not hi, I'm Tristan. I'm not a clinician, never have been.
Right,
Right. Okay.
right,
Um, I did learn about trauma-informed care from clinicians, right?
right,
I had clients who were in their technology conversations talking about trauma-informed care
right.
and wanting to build some widgets around it that we were working on. And probably one of the best things I ever did for my career and my life was say, would you be willing to teach me about that before
Hmm.
we just, build what you say? And so I've had some mentors over the years that were willing to step aside and teach me, which they didn't have to do.
Right.
And so I'll forever appreciate that. But there's an agency out in Brooklyn that was really the cornerstone for me to understand trauma informed care. And they do a number of things at this agency. However, one of their biggest or most used offerings is HIV testing.
Hmm.
And so the principle for them was just the act of needing to get a test is traumatic.
Hmm.
Not even forget the result. We're not even talking about the result. If you feel like you need to go get an HIV test, you are almost certainly experiencing trauma at right then. Like it's happening to you.
Hmm.
And the profoundness of that for them was we're doing HIV testing, right? We're doing outpatient mental health, we're doing supportive housing, we're doing all of these things, right? The likelihood that somebody coming in for HIV testing also needs some of these other services is actually very high. And so instead of saying, here's your test, and if you need anything else, let us know,
Right.
they said, you're coming in for your test and you're going to take this brief trauma screener.
Yeah.
Right. And they built a workflow that said, you know, take you the short form trauma screener and we'll score it
Hmm.
up. And if the score goes above or below a certain threshold or above a certain threshold, we're gonna have you stay for a longer form screener, right? And we're gonna try to get a better sense of it. And then we're gonna say we either think you're okay for now, or we're gonna recommend that you enroll in one of our other programs, maybe even right now, right?
Right.
And so they use this idea of like easily identifiable probable trauma scenario to put more of a wraparound, instead of taking your test and sending you out to just dwell on it, right? And wait in that anxiety. They're saying your test is in and we have support right here, right now, before you walk out of this building. That'll make I don't so here's where like my language kind of breaks down. Like we just want to help you.
Right.
be on the
Right.
be on the test strip, right?
Right.
And so the data behind that at first is very simple, where program enrollments start to rise, and they're
Hmm.
rising as a direct result of a timely trauma screening intervention, right?
Hmm.
Now, secondarily to that, they introduced me to the assessment tools.
Hmm.
PHQ-9, which we know is commonly used for depression and is sort of ubiquitously used as a symptomatic scale. You could find all kinds of debates on whether it's overused or improperly used. And so, but it produces data, right? But then the other one is the functionality scale, is the DLA 20, 20 question domains about functioning. Now, I'm a huge, from a data perspective, I love the DLA 20 because it's not a symptomatic scale. It's not dependent on a
Hmm.
diagnosis to be accurate. It asks questions about how you're functioning throughout your
Hmm.
day and your life in over
Hmm.
days and months, right? And so in an ideal world, symptom scale goes down, functioning scale goes up, and you'd like to see a graph per individual that looks like that. Okay. But it's possible that symptom reduction might not be easily achievable or maybe
Hmm.
ever achievable. I mean, it's possible, but you might also be able to track data that says, well, I may not have reduced your schizophrenia, I
Hmm.
may have helped you with coping in a way that you're living a more functional life that can also be positive, right? So what did we say earlier? Two things could be true. You
Hmm.
can, we're not maybe going to cure you, but we may
Right.
be able to improve the quality of your life. And I think that it's such a, you know, those kinds of scales are important in behavioral health, because this isn't like your blood pressure where we got it down and it's down and you're mathematically your blood pressure's better, right? That's a thing that you can do. Can we just sort of quantifiably cure folks of depression, schizophrenia, bipolar? Like, not necessarily. It's not so black and white. And I think the data needs to lean into that instead of trying to force it to say you are better. This is better. Like, I
Hmm.
think the therapeutic modalities are gray, so the data needs to be allowed to be gray too, but live in the context, right? You need to know the context
Hmm.
of which you're looking at all this stuff. So, all right, so I'll just bring that back real quick to, I've got an agency that's got a workflow that's increasing enrollments, that's then tracking, functionality progress of those clients over time, and able to prove that starting from a known trauma, getting in the right treatment modality can produce a better life. And I can, data map that all the way through. Um, that to me says trauma informed care works.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like how you mapped that. That was great. That was great. I might have to take some of that out and put it into like a little flow chart when I we put this out, publish this. So I like
Yeah.
that. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tristan. We so appreciate the thought that you put into blending, trauma-informed care into these, quality assurance, tech spaces. It's obviously something I think about it constantly. My background's in experience design, instructional design, and accessible design. So I mean, that's just where my head is all the time.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's like that's like my first nature to me. So I appreciate your lens with this, and people can find you on LinkedIn, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Awesome. We'll put your LinkedIn in the middle of the show at the end of the show notes. Thank you so much for your expertise and your knowledge. We so appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Tristan.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye.